All right, good evening, everybody. We're all ready to go, yeah? Thank you. We're a couple of minutes late, so I want to get started because we are on the broadcast this evening. So perhaps push the door, Pat. Thank you very much. Just before we start tonight, I want to give a bit of a welcome to the group. This is the Growth and Infrastructure Overview Scrutiny Committee, as you know. Before we start, can I bring your attention to some housekeeping matters? There's no expected fire alarm testing today, therefore if the fire alarm sounds, please follow the fire and emergency procedures that are applicable to the council house, which, as I understand it, is all at the front, assembled in the car park. If you can't get at the front, it's all at the back, assembled over there. Please can I ask you to use your microphone addressing the meeting and switched off when you're not using it, because the camera will pan to whoever's got their microphone on. And I must make sure I do that because it comes on me if mine's on. So when you're speaking, microphone on, please, as soon as you finish, microphone off. Thank you very much. Mobile devices are turned to silent or off, whichever you prefer, please. And the meeting will be broadcast live to the internet and will be capable of subsequent repeated viewing. By entering the Warspite room this evening and during the course of the meeting, councillors are consenting to being filmed and to the use of those recordings for webcasting. Any questions on regards to that? Lovely, we'll move on then. Can I ask if we've got any apologies today, please?
We've received apologies from Councillor Ian Poyser with George Wheeler subbing, and also from Councillor Chip Tofan.
Okay. Thank you very much and welcome, Councillor Wheeler. Just before we get on to the main meeting today, I was asked before the meeting, and if you remember at the last meeting, I did say that looking at previous minutes of this committee, sometimes we were drifting in 3.5 hours, and a couple of them were even longer. And I said that it was my intention to try and focus a little bit on issues that we felt was really relevant, have updates that we could through email have a look at, but not necessarily put them on the agenda. The whole idea was to condense the meeting down. So my ambition is for this meeting to be absolutely no longer than 2 hours. If we can do less than that, then I'll be more than happy. That's not to say that don't want questions asked and we scrutinise what we have in front of us today. That's not the reason. But the reason is because I think in past agendas we have it too much on the agenda of this committee and we weren't giving it the proper scrutiny. So that's one of the reasons. Having taken it down to a maximum of 2 hours, which we'll be adhered to today, and I say if we get through before we do. Our last meeting was postponed, but was scheduled after full council. Full council was on the Monday, which I'm aware that councillors who have jobs have to take a day off for the Monday meeting of the full council, and we were scheduled for that Wednesday afternoon. And I was just trying to be a bit considerate towards members, maybe having to take 2 days off a week. I'm lucky I'm in a retirement position, so when I attended is not a massive consequence to me, but I just thought on that Wednesday it would have been better to move it to the, having committed to a 2 hour maximum, move it to the Wednesday evening so that members were not having to take 2 days off work in 1 week. That was the whole rationale behind moving it to that time on that day. Obviously events changed the whole scenario with regards to meetings, we moved it on, but in the interest of the first thing I've said today, I've decided to keep it at 5:30 to 7:30 for members, and I just think members who have got day jobs, if we're only meeting once every 3 months, a couple of hours in the evening is not too much of a burden. So that's my reason is chair behind it. I did consult my vice chair and he was supportive of that, so let's see how it goes today. Yeah, lovely, thank you very much. Would be better if we did, yes, please.
Oh, yeah, yes, please. Okay.
So I would ask from declarations of interest. I'm just wondering whether we should give it 30 seconds to see whether Councillor Lang is up to speed with the agenda and whether is there anybody else got declarations of interest this afternoon? This evening?
Yeah, if I may, Chair, as I mentioned before, I've got a residents' meeting this evening, so I need to leave slightly early.
Okay, it's not a declaration of interest, but duly noted. Anybody got declaration of interest? Thank you very much. So if we have a look at the minutes of the meeting of the 22nd of June. Has anybody got any comments? Are we happy, show of hands, to declare them a true record of the meeting? Thank you very much. Moving on then to item 4, Chair's urgent business. I have none today. So item 5, policy updates.
Through you, Chair, I think you've got Lucy Davis online to
right, okay.
introduce the report if needed. Otherwise, I think it's just questions from members. Thanks, Chair.
Thank you very much, Ross. Apologies, Lucy, you weren't on the big screen. You were a little circle and it didn't catch my eye. I do apologise. But you are now taking up the screen, so if you could give us a policy update today, please, I'd be much appreciated. Thank you.
Thank you, Chair, and good evening, everyone. So committee members will have seen the policy brief circulated in your pack. It contains a roundup of the key government policy announcements, consultations, and any changes to relevant legislation that have taken place since the committee last met. The main points, I think, to draw to your attention are the Chancellor's new growth plan 2022, which set out the government's intention to establish investment zones across the UK. It also referenced new legislation to be introduced through the Planning and Infrastructure Bill to accelerate priority major infrastructure projects across England. And the plan also outlined changes to tax. The Chancellor's statement also made mention of the interventions that had already been announced in relation to government support for businesses and families with rising energy costs. Since the policy brief was approved and published, there have been a few amendments and updates for the committee to note. Firstly, the Chancellor has confirmed that the government will not proceed with the abolition of the 45p tax rate for higher earners as previously stated in the mini budget. And DLUC has now invited expressions of interest for investment zones from all mayoral combined authorities, upper tier councils and free ports in England. And the deadline for the expressions of interest is noon this Friday. And the Chancellor has also confirmed today in a letter to the Chair of the Treasury Select Committee, Mel Stride, that he has moved forward his medium-term fiscal plan to Monday the 31st of October. That's earlier than previously stated on the 23rd of November and earlier than you have outlined in the policy brief in your pack. So I just wanted to provide those updates, please.
Thank you, Lucy. Are there any comments, observations from members? Mark, I'll come to you in a second. Councillor Lang, thanks for standing in this evening, brilliant. If you could just have a quick scan through today's agenda, or maybe I did ask for declarations of interest just before we come into the meeting. So retrospectively, if you see something there, let us know. Thank you very much. Councillor Coker.
Thank you, Chair. Lucy, there's two things there that really interest me, and I've yet to find out what this council is doing. The first is the capping of a single bus ticket to £2. It's currently not happening in Plymouth, so I think it would be really interesting to see what plans we have with our two providers, and are we bidding for that money, or does it come naturally to us or to the bus operator? And the second bit is, I think this committee would be really beneficial to learn what's the social prescribing in walking and cycling is, because that's in something that the government has just announced, and I know we've got some money to do it, but that's as far as we know what's happening with that. So it would be really interesting, if not today, but if I see Councillor Shares nodding, perhaps we can have some kind of updates, because that's really important to the city, perhaps at another time, Chair.
I'm happy with that. It's a great suggestion, and the nodding from the cabinet member, that's not going to be an issue. Is that something that we can get organised? Thank you very much. Any other observations, comments? Councillor Holloway.
Thank you, Chair. In the policy update, there was mention of the government's announcement on investment zones. Is there any further detail that officers can share about their analysis of the impact of what that might be on Plymouth? What substance there is behind them that might cause a change in approach from the City Council?
Yeah. Anthony?
Yeah. Councillor Holloway. So we're in the position where we can apply to upgrade, it's not probably the technical term, but the Freeport to become an investment zone. So that's just through an expression of interest, a very simple process. All Freeports around the country are being given that opportunity. If you look at the the investment zone guidance, it contains fiscal benefits which are of a better nature than Freeports currently get. So it would be an unfair playing field if Freeports didn't have the same opportunities as investment zones. So government's recognised that, and as part of the EOI process, by the end of this week, there will be a request to take the added benefits with no other change whatsoever to our Freeport submission. So nothing will change from what's got approval to seek and to gain in investment zone status. In parallel to that, we are working on an investment zone EOI submission for further, more detailed discussion with government on our city centre and our waterfront, which would just be purely a Plymouth City Council-led initiative, out with and outside, nothing to do with the Freeport.
Thank you, Anthony. Councillor Wheeler.
Could I just ask for a bit more information there on the relaxation of planning controls? If we're looking for an investment zone on the waterfront, does that mean that developers can do what they like?
I'll take that. To the best of my ability, I'll take that, Chair. So in terms of the guidance and what it means for relaxation of planning, we're still waiting for that from government. So it's very much being developed as we speak. So I've not seen that, Councillor Wheeler. In terms of the discussions I've had with civil servants, this is more about speed of granting permissions and trying to unblock opportunities for development rather than changing policy per se. So in the latest conversation I had, there still will be the ability or the necessity to protect heritage, to, well, not in our case, Greenbelt, because we haven't got Greenbelt, but those type of policies to give protection to address flood, building safety, all those sorts of things. So reading between the lines at this stage, it's more about the process and enabling quicker decision making rather than throwing away the policies that exist around all those areas. But until we see the actual guidance that comes out of government, I can't really say more than that. The only thing I can say, or I should reiterate, is it's just an EOI at this stage. And of course, if stuff comes back, which we are totally unhappy with, then we take a view on that.
Councillor Holloway.
Thank you. Councillor Wheeler's point is an important one, I think. In the approach that we're taking in the expression of interest, we're not doing anything that would say jeopardise the vision of National Marine Park or areas of outstanding attribute and Dartmoor and so forth. You know, nature groups have expressed some discontent around the plan. There is nothing at risk in our current approach under these investment zone plans.
In terms, Chair, in terms of the Freeport, nothing changes from our full business case submission. So it's not changing designations, it's not changing geography or area or anything at all. So it's what people have signed up to already. And your second question, sorry, the first was to do with the city.
More to do on the sort of natural and environmental impacts of any expressions that have gone. If you're saying it hasn't changed.
No,
so
well,
that's the
as it
second
stands,
question,
no
but-
is the answer.
Okay, as it
Yeah,
stands.
as it
but-
stands. Until I get more guidance, I can't comment on it because I can't predict what the guidance is going to say.
Understood.
If there's no more, well, Councillor Partridge.
Thank you, Chair. A bit more about any information around the licence update for businesses to serve food and drink on pavements and pedestrianised roads.
It's not something I can give you an update on. I don't know if there's anybody else in the room that can, Lucy, I don't know if there's anything that you.
Quite scant of
Can you-
information.
Yeah, sorry, I'm just trying to find it on. Oh, it's the last announcement I've got you. So yes, all councils in England will need to get agreement from. Oh, hang on. Sorry, no, I haven't. I'm not with you. Yeah, so these were the temporary changes that were brought in during COVID. And the extension will continue until the changes are made permanent in the spring of 2023, is my understanding.
Happy with that?
Answers that question. Thank you.
Thank you very much. If there's nothing else, then I'll move on. Thank you very much, Lucy, for your time today and contribution.
Thank you, Chair.
Item 6, risk review. Over to you, Mr. Jago.
Thanks, Chair. Just by way of introduction, if I say why this is here, is probably helpful. The Audit and Governance Committee review both strategic and operational risk on a regular basis. As the Chair of Audit will know, what they're seeking is further assurance around risks, which it's generally not able to do during its scheduled cycles. So each scrutiny committee has now been provided with a cut of the strategic risk register pertaining to their terms of reference. This is the cut from May, so this is quite an early risk report. It's fair to say this is going to be updated within the next 6 weeks. So at your next scheduled session on the 7th of December, you'll have a further update on this risk report. There's 4 amber risks in there, Chair, relating to economic performance in the city, 1 on carbon projects, and then there's a risk that probably shouldn't be in here, which is in relation to waste, and that doesn't fall within your terms of reference. The final green risk reference the joint local plan. Now, the reason they're here, Chair, is so you can consider whether you need to schedule any of these items onto your work programme. I would suggest, though, that the work programme currently covers all of these issues. You will receive a risk update at every meeting, so when you have an agenda item, say, for example, on the Freeport, you'll be able to cross-reference to the risk relating to economic health of the city. Chair, that's all I have by way of introduction. Happy to take questions should there be any. Thank you.
So, having had that, any questions from members? No, fine, okay, happy with that. So on your agenda, I think you've now got the city centre update. I took an executive decision to swap that with an update on the box. So if I can turn to Councillor Pat Patel to introduce the item, please. So I've got a revised agenda here, we're doing item 8 on your agenda. Councillor Patel.
Thank you, Chair. I'll give you a quick brief update before handing over to Victoria Pomeroy and Chloe Hughes from the box. So as you're all aware, the box opened on the 29th of September 2020. Therefore, it's just marked its 2nd anniversary. Since opening, the box has had over 350,000 visitors during a period that saw all museums and galleries close from the 31st of December through to mid-May 2021, and followed by extensive restrictions on the numbers given the pandemic. The investment in the box has been very significant, and the project was hugely ambitious undertaking for the council, perhaps the most significant in England in recent years. This investment by Plymouth City Council was also generously supported by the Arts Council of England and the National Heritage Lottery Fund, as well as several other funders and private donors. The facilities for storage of archive materials and museum materials has been improved beyond recognition. All material is now in one climate control store accessible to the team and researchers. In addition, the facility for audiences and visitors are of a very high standard, with a state-of-the-art galleries, visitor facilities, including a shop, cafe and WCs, and a real focus on physical and intellectual access. During the capital project, St Luke's was refurbished to become the exhibition space, and a new public square was developed on Tavistock Place to enhance the cultural quarter in this part of the city. The report gives a sense of the progress that has been made since opening and the benefits that the box has brought to the city. The box is changing perceptions about Plymouth and has garnered considerable national and international media attention. The box has undoubtedly generated civic pride, and audiences to the box are primarily made up of local people. The learning and engagement programs are very extensive, and the work with schools, colleges and universities, as well as some of the hardest to reach communities in the city. As you may all be aware, the British Art Show opened to the public on the 8th of October. Plymouth last hosted the British Art Show, Art Show 7 in 2011, and there are 3 other venues offering free admission to the British Art Show. The exhibition runs until the 8th of January at the box. I'll hand over now to...
Well, thank you, Councillor Pat Patel. And just to introduce myself, I'm Victoria Pomeroy. I'm the CEO of the box and came into post a year ago. And with me today, I've got Chloe Hughes, who's our engagement programs manager. I always wanted to call her learning and engagement manager because that's in effect what she does. And learning's absolutely essential to the ethos of the box. So Pat, I think, has given you a good introduction to where the box has got to, what's happened over the past 2 years. And tonight I think we're really just going to focus a bit on British Art Show and enable you to have a bit of time to comment and ask questions. And as Pat said, we opened on Friday night, and I know some of you were there, and it was an amazing buzz in the room and atmosphere. The box welcomed, I think, more than 350 people on Friday night, and over the weekend we've had just about 2,000 visits, which is incredible. And as Pat said, you know, the investment in culture in the city is reaping dividends already. Yes, there's still some way to go, but I think the huge ambition and investment in the box has realised civic pride, which is slightly hard to evaluate how you measure that. But also we've seen lots more press attention, and I think Plymouth's profile has been raised in the last 2 years. The vision at the box is to reimagine the future through the past, and I think that's really important to hold on to, given we have lots of history here in Plymouth and lots of historical assets to use. In terms of British Art Show, I want to just give you a sort of flavour of that, and there's quite a lot in the report, but it's an exhibition that's been running since 1979, and it's organised by the Hayward Gallery Touring, who is a gallery based in London, but they tour every 5 years British Art Show. And curators, external curators, are invited to curate the exhibition. And on this occasion, the show has been seen in Aberdeen, Wolverhampton and Manchester, and Plymouth is the final leg of the tour. Here we have 37 artists, and we've worked in collaboration. There's a citywide partnership made up of the University of Plymouth, Arts University, CAST, which is down at Mill Bay, and Plymouth Culture. And I think the coming together, the working in partnership has been really, really important. So I feel this exhibition is really timely. These are some of the best artists we have making work here in the UK at the moment. there are 6 Turner Prize nominees and 3 Turner Prize winners. And it's an opportunity for audiences in Plymouth to see really inspiring, but also sometimes quite challenging contemporary art. And I think just to say that the team across those organisations who've been working on British Art Show, and it's been a project that's been a long time in the making because of COVID, that we're really very conscious that not all visitors are going to be familiar with this kind of work, nor are all visitors necessarily have visited a museum or gallery previously. So we've got quite a lot of work to do to engage audiences and to ensure that British Art Show is seen by children and young people from across the city, but also older generations. And on the images, you're just seeing people enjoying life at the box, but also some of the work in British Art Show. And so we've done quite a lot really to think about how do we engage and how do we make artists' work who are dealing with big ideas, how do we make it as accessible for as many people as possible? And that's why we have a team of learning and engagement staff headed by Chloe to really lead on that work, and why we spend a lot of time internally as an organisation thinking about who our audiences are and how can we get them to come to the box. Alongside British Art Show, we've recruited 6 ambassadors, and they're individuals who have excellent networks beyond our networks. So they're people with maybe lived experience of disability, emerging artists. There's a real range of individuals, and they're here to work with us to mediate, as it were, between artists, art, and communities. And I think what we're going to see, well, what we're hoping to see by the end of the show, is a real change in terms of the audiences who are coming. Working with Plymouth Culture, they have developed a new tap-in app, which I'm sure you've probably all heard about. It's when you enter one of the venues as part of the British Art Show, as well as other venues like Theatre Royal Plymouth are also part of this initiative. You tap in, and then we can collect data about audiences. And that data is incredibly important, particularly given that we're free, to know who's coming, where they're coming from, and then we can work out who's not coming and actually start to assess why they're not coming. So alongside the work of the ambassadors, we've also got a massive programme of talks and events. We want to engage with dedicated art audiences, so there are artist talks, there's a symposium, but we also want to engage with those new to contemporary art. So for instance, with schools, we've got a whole range of activities, there's workshops for families, and there are opportunities for everyone to come into the gallery and be part of a tour which is free. No one should feel that they can't understand what's happening. Everyone is really welcome, and we want to engage with all those visitors. As I said at the beginning, over the weekend we've had almost 2,000 visits into the box on Saturday and Sunday. Really positive feedback. I think people really finding the work inspiring but challenging too, and it's dealing with some big issues of our age, issues around identity, representation, how we look after one another, and how we care for the environment. So I think that's probably all the words that I want to say. Chloe might just say a few words about some of the engagement, but we can easily just go into questions and comments. Thank you, Chair.
So, option is yours, Chloe. Thank you very much, Victoria. Option is yours, Chloe. Did you want to say something, or do you want to launch the committee at you?
I'm quite up for launching the committee, if that's okay. Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Lugger.
Congratulations to all involved with the box. Through you, Chair, could I ask Victoria and the team, you won a commendation at the European Museum Award, was it? Are we expecting any more high accolades and commendations which will put Plymouth on the map?
Well, we're always ambitious, and I think, you know, there are things like annually there's the Art Fund Museum of the Year. We haven't applied for that yet. That comes up on an annual basis. We have a very good relationship with Art Fund, who also supported the funding of British Art Show. So yes, I would hope so. And only today we have been visited by a judge to look at for an architectural prize in the Southwest. So, you know, hopefully there will be other things in the offing.
Thank you, Chair. On top of that, Councillor Lugger, we've also had accreditation for the archives twice. I think we're one of the few in the UK that's actually had it twice, and not many people get it the first time. So we've actually had it twice. Thank you.
Thank you, Pat. I've got Councillor Goslin.
Thank you very much. So focusing on the visitors and revenue to the box. First of all, first question is, based on current footfall, are you on track to hit your forecast of 200,000 visitors per year? Presumably there's lots of variations over the time of year. Secondly, you hint that revenues are down. So what percentage down is the box currently on revenue per footfall? And thirdly, how is the box doing with commercial, commercial activities regarding the hiring of the space and the event and other activities which bring in revenue to the box? And are we on track for hitting the revenue targets for this year? And what are the risks? Thank you. That's a lot of questions there, I'm sorry.
Okay, thank you. In terms of numbers, I think we are on target. I mean, we're very optimistic about the 200,000. But, you know, there are some caveats around if there's another COVID spike and people don't want to come and visit because they're worried about that, then obviously that might get derailed. But at the moment, it looks good for the 200,000 for the financial year. In terms of income, so the income we generate from the shop is definitely down. It's probably down about 30%. There's been quite a lot of work to mitigate that and really to think about what do we need to do to the shop, and there's a new range of products that have gone on in for the opening of the show. And I think it's ongoing, it's working out who are the audiences that we're currently getting and what is their propensity to spend. And we all know that there's a massive cost of living crisis at the moment. And I think it's also about maybe thinking about the value that the box attracts is sort of different from economic value per se. So I think we've still got to do some work around that. In terms of revenue from commercial, we had, I think it's true to say we've gone a bit up and down in terms of revenue, but at the moment it's looking quite good in terms of venue hire. I couldn't actually tell you the figures just off the top of my head, but you know, it's looking better than it has looked. But again, it's about, you know, this time last year, we suddenly went in late sort of November into the Omicron issue, and lots of people cancelled venue hire. So we're optimistic, but there's still that caveat of providing things don't go wrong.
So just get an idea about income, because it's income from commercial sources, commercial hiring, there's the shop, there's also the relationship with Foster's. Is that a profit sharing relationship, or you just basically Foster's just run the bar and they take the income, or does the box benefit from a percentage of income there? And what's the income like from Foster's if there is a potential benefit to the box?
Okay, so we do get income from Foster's if they're performing well, and I think there are levels at which they perform. So we are constantly monitoring the spend per head in terms of catering. I think what we found, because of the cost of living crisis, people are spending less in the cafe than maybe they were a year ago, and obviously that, you know, that's a negative impact in terms of the benefit and the return that we get as an organisation. So to answer your question, catering's going through a really tricky time at the moment, and we are absolutely working with Foster's to monetize and maximise spend, whilst recognising that not everyone who comes into the museum spends money on our catering or on our retail.
Yeah, carry on.
So based on the current financial projections of income, which you've intimated are all down, how is that going to impact into what the box can do culturally for the city in the upcoming year? Because presumably incomes are down, so that will feed through to what we can do with the box. Can you give some comments on
Well, I
that?
think the other way of looking at it is also how we work with trusts and foundations and how we work with individual donors. So we don't have a dedicated fundraising team, but we are fundraising. So we're constantly submitting bids to, you know, places like Arts Council, but also to Art Fund, to, I think one's gone into the Heritage Innovation Fund the other day. So those are ways for us to really start to think bringing additional funds in, which we might not have originally thought we would be able to attract. And that's what the real focus is on, is bid writing, but you have to write a lot of bids to get some that are successful. But that's what we're writing.
All I was going to add, Jeremy, just a couple of things. Just I suppose looking at the budget level from the department as a whole, economic development, as opposed to the box. I mean, just to give you a sense of the ambition of the income from the old museum to the box. So the old museum's income target in 13-14 was £965,000. That was the income target. And the income target for the box this year is 2.5 million. The other thing to say is, I think over £1 million of that is Arts Council grant, which was increased by £500,000. So, you know, what we've actually managed to do with the box is reduce the net budget from the old museum by replacing those income streams. And I think that's, you know, that's a credit to the team. I know, for example, in the shop, while sales are down, profit is not down to the same degree. So, you know, there's other things to look at it. But I mean, I certainly think that the key challenge is as we get new visitors in, because if you've been once, then are you going to buy the same thing from the shops? The trick is we've got a high level of repeat visits, and I think the work that flows from the programme of getting new people in is the key to unlocking that growth. And like all restaurants, you know, every single restaurant pretty much over this summer period has had problems with inflation which has applied through to the cost of materials, wage inflation, and on the back of COVID. So I mean, I think, given the COVID scarring, I think the box has done pretty well considering that scale of COVID scarring. And I think, you know, I think Victoria is being rightly conservative about the numbers. But I mean, I think the visitor numbers, you know, those visitor numbers the weekend, the shows, the Bernard Shaw George Shaw show was really indicative. If we get the programming right, the numbers just go through. We've had some really exciting spikes, haven't we, looking at the numbers over the last 3 to 4 months. And, you know, we don't want to go too early, but if we sustain those numbers over a long period of time, then I think we could really hit that, you know, significantly more than the 200. And of course, that drives the spend per capita, etc.
Thank you, David. Councillor Coker.
Thank you. I'm going to go back. I think, Victoria, we've talked about this before. I was interested to listen to how you're communicating and engaging, because, as you know, I've been critical of engagement. So I'd like could you update me, when are we going to be able to have some figures for attendance from such as Devonport, St Budo, the areas around the city, that actually when you go around Devonport or St Budo, the box is not high on their agenda because they don't know about it or they don't know what's on offer. And actually, if we're trying to make the box an inclusive thing for all of the city, we've got 10,000 people in Devonport that, you know, we don't know how many of them are coming, how many of our schools or my schools are being engaged with. And this is something that's really important for our communities, to actually make sure that this fantastic facility, and I'm not knocking it at all, but my concern has always been about getting those people in certain wards more engaged. And I know we've talked about it constantly. So it'd be nice to have some update on that.
Well, I couldn't agree with you more. And yes, you know, we've still got a lot more to do. But I think I'm going to hand over to Chloe to just talk about some of the things that we have been doing and where I think we are really penetrating into those parts of the city where you might not expect visitors to come from.
Thank you. Yeah, I think I'd agree that data is really king with this. And given that we're at our second kind of anniversary at the moment, we're really starting to gather now what the data of our audience profile looks like. We've been doing some really interesting work thanks to Arts Council and their Culture Count survey, where we've got better and much clearer indication of who our audiences are across our exhibitions. We're also able to look at that now against audience data we had previously when we were in the process of having to ticket audience members. So we're increasingly starting to gather data across the piece to understand who is coming. And what that is telling us is that it's predominantly a local audience. So we're having to really kind of work hard to make sure we're getting that message out to local people, but also not forgetting a wider, more regional and a wider national audience as well. And I know that there's a lot of thought and care that goes into our programming to think about how are we making sure that we're picking up on those exhibitions that are going to really speak to local people. So some of you may have seen Because the Night Belongs to Us, which was a mass community exhibition that we had in St Luke's Church over the summer that particularly picked up on people's kind of memories and nostalgia of Union Street and nights out in the city. But we've also got exhibitions like British Art Show, which are really picking up on that kind of putting Plymouth on that national map. There's also been some really interesting work that's been done around schools. So you will have seen in the report that we've got some various infographics and information about the schools and where we're reaching schools across the city. And the latest data is showing us that we are reaching schools in 90% of the wards. And we've got quite a lot more work to do around that, but we've been targeting through funded projects our activities in wards which are identified as the top 10 wards of deprivation according to the IMD data. So where we're bringing in funding from various trusts and foundations, we're very targeted about the schools that we choose to work with, and particularly focusing on deprivation and schools in which we haven't yet managed to develop a relationship.
Thank you, Chloe. Just as a follow-up that, and I have read it, so I knew what you were going to say. When will we be in a position to actually say that 1% of your audience comes from my ward? That's only making figures easy. And 20% comes from Stoke and 50% comes from St Peter's and the waterfront. Because that surely if we can drill down that deep, we can actually have a much better understanding of where we've got to target this, because it is free, it is something that the city's proud of, and my concern is that we're not doing that. But thank you for that update anyway, Chloe.
Thank you. Councillor Lang.
Thank you, Chair. Yeah, I was there on Friday night, and it was really amazing to see people. You know, there were so many people there that people were spilling out onto the area outside. So that was really exciting to see. I've got two questions. You've kind of answered one of them, actually. My first question is, you talked about having an ambassador who has lived experience of disability, and I just wondered if you could tell us a bit about how you reassure yourself for this particular exhibition, but the box as a whole, that you've made it as accessible as possible. And my second question was around schools and engagement with schools. And so you've kind of outlined that a bit, but can you tell us a little bit about barriers? I presume then there are schools that have not paid a visit to the box. I would expect that all schools have had something to do with the box. So I'd just like to understand what the barriers are, why they're not engaging, and what we can do even as ward councillors to encourage people to get involved school-wise, whether we go to governing bodies to talk to them or the education board or whatever. Because if we've been open for 2 years and every school more or less hasn't been to the box, then I think there's something that we, between us, need to do to make that happen. Thanks. That's 2 questions. I hope that's all right, Chair.
So in terms of making the box as accessible as possible, I think the ambassador scheme is a really good approach that we're taking. This is the first time we've tried this, but we do know that it's worked particularly successfully in Aberdeen, Wolverhampton and Manchester, the other 3 key national locations for British Art Show. So with the ambassadors, we have recruited 6 people, and we went out to an open call, had a number of really strong applications, but we were really keen to balance people with a range of lived experiences and networks and backgrounds and interests across the city. And I think we really recognise that museums and galleries and other cultural spaces are not as representative, both within our workforce, volunteers and audiences, as they should be. So being really targeted about who those ambassadors are is a really fantastic way for us to get into those networks that are really, really hard to reach. So to give you a kind of flavour and overview of who some of our ambassadors are, or the kind of experiences that they bring with them, we've got a person who's got lived experience of care, we've got somebody with lived experience of disability, we've got some emerging artists, people of colour as part of that group. So a real kind of range, including working quite heavily with Devon and Cornwall Refugee Support Group to bring people from their group into the mix as well. So we'll be watching and trialling that very carefully, and there's a whole piece of evaluation work which will go into understanding the impact of that, but we're really very much at the start, and it's how we work with those ambassadors who can help us reach those communities and groups that we may otherwise struggle to reach. And just on the point around accessibility, we have one of those ambassadors who's got a particular interest in neurodiversity. They have lived experience of neurodiversity. So we're perhaps better able to think about what we need to do to accommodate and consider that within the exhibition. Just onto the question around schools and the barriers, the key barrier that comes up again and again and again is transport. So the cost of coaches is really difficult, and you can actually see on our map the schools that are within the stone's throw, within an easy walk of us. We have some of our best relationships with because they're able to come in again and again. And what I haven't included in the report, but we would be able to share with you, is the percentage of schools who are repeat visitors. So that's relatively high and building. So we know when they come, when we get them through the door, they want to come back. And we build those relationships with teachers through our teacher ambassador network, which means that whenever we're developing sessions, we're always working with teachers and bringing their expertise and their classroom knowledge to bear within those sessions as well. I think one of the other challenges we have is around creativity within the curriculum. So we're really interested in putting the arts, into STEM subjects, so turning STEM into STEAM. And you'll see that we've done that through projects like Mission Mammoth, where we were working in partnership with Building Plymouth over the summer, bringing children as part of their primary school enrichment sessions out into the box, and working quite closely with the universities as part of that too.
Follow up.
Yeah, it's not a question really. I'm just thinking then, is there any way we could have a list as councillors of a school in our ward that hasn't been to the box? And then maybe there's something we could do around community grant to pay, if transport is a barrier, maybe we could pay for that coach or whatever, because I really think it would be an amazing target to have as many of our schools in the city go to the box. It's just obvious. And then hopefully that engages those young people and they'll want to come back with their families and all the rest of it. So is that something that we would be able to get?
Yeah, that would be fantastic, and it would be brilliant to speak to councillors about that level of support, and we can provide that list very quickly.
Thank you very much, Chloe. I think it's an excellent idea, Councillor Lang. Councillor Finn.
Yeah, I just want to say well done for all the hard work that you've actually put in. And it's a pleasure to hear that Plymouth's on the map, even in the USA, for example. Meeting an astronaut 5 years ago, he asked how Union Street was doing. John McBride used to fly under secondment with the British Royal Navy. So the reach is there, regard especially to tourists. I don't know whether you thought of that, haven't you? And also it's lovely to see your work on the 60s, 70s and 80s, which are very informative years for a lot of older people. Just one thing, with regard to contemporary art, we've produced some fantastic artists such as Lenkovich and Beryl Cook. Is there anything in the foreseeable future to exhibit their work and the historical side of Plymouth. You've been in touch with Rubens or Esther Dalloway, for example.
Oh, well, thank you for that. So there's a very diverse programme coming up, and we plan 2 to 3 years in advance, and that's where we need to be, because actually we need to be talking to colleagues across the UK, but further afield, and also, you know, talking to artists about making new work. So, for instance, next autumn we will be showing a new film by John O'Comfort, who's a leading filmmaker. That work has been, I think, about 4 years in production. So that's the time frame that quite often we're working to. I think your points about artists with an association with Plymouth, such as Beryl Cook, are points well made, and we actually discussed this very issue with some of your colleagues last week. And I think it's, you know, we're trying to create a balanced programme which is historical and contemporary. So I'm not saying we're never going to do that, but in the foreseeable future, it's not on the planner, if that helps. But yeah, we know about them and we're very aware. But I also think it's in terms of how we reposition Plymouth and how we put ourselves on the map, which then helps Plymouth be on the map. We've got to really think about artists who may have, you know, maybe at the start of their careers. For instance, over the summer, we showed the work of Zadie Zar. She's got her first big London show is opened, I think, a couple of weeks ago at the Whitechapel Art Gallery. But we were the first museum in England to show her work pre the Whitechapel. She's likely to be someone who might be a Turner Prize nominee in the future. So I think it's just that we're trying to also work with living artists who are hopefully have got an upward trajectory in terms of their career.
Thank you very much. Councillor Salmon.
Thank you, Chair. I had 2 questions which have now been fully covered by Councillor Coke and Councillor Lang.
Thank you very much, then, Councillor Salmon. We'll move on.
Just a general observation. I was also there on Friday. If you haven't been, please do. It's absolutely fantastic. I was amazed at the standards and the variety. And also the difference in ages. I mean, there were very young people there and there were much older people and ancient people like me, and it's all the same. I was looking out, I must admit, for Margaret Salmon's work. I don't know why I would do that, but I don't have that ability in it. But absolutely fantastic. Please do go. Thank you, Chair.
Yeah, thank you, Councillor. I think we can all agree it's been a fantastic success, and I, for one, would like to pass my thanks to what you've done, putting Plymouth on the map with that project, that cross-party project, which has been absolutely fantastic. I believe in a massive success, so it's great. Well, just before I move into where our burning recommendations come out of today. Sorry. So in terms, I just wanted to ask one quick thing before we move on to the recommendations. If I was to ask the 4 cabinet member and Chloe, Victoria and David, who's here today, if you were to do a quick strengths, weakness, opportunities, threats analysis in your head, and I don't want you to utter one word, but if you were to do one in your head now, how could we as a committee assist you? Is there anything that we could do today, a recommendation that we could put forward that would be beneficial to you? Well, to all of you, really. Probably sits with you, David, but
well,
I mean...
I think Jemima's suggestion of, and actually Mark's suggestion of getting into your ward networks is what it's about, because, you know, fundamentally we want this institution to be loved by the citizens of this city. We'll certainly work incredibly hard, and you know, that's why we employed professionals like Victoria and Chloe to do the national profiling. But you're the community leaders for your community, so I suppose there's an open invitation for how can we work with you on a ward by ward basis to try and build some long-term relationships. And I think the offer about using community grants to open up transport is a brilliant suggestion. Absolutely brilliant.
Yeah, I totally agree. So sorry. Councillor Coker, if you think along the lines of a recommendation you want to put together today, and Councillor Lang, you do the same, I think top tables indicated that that's something that they would be, think is beneficial. Cabinet members nodding along, and I think we all agree here. So something around the wards and letting us know what's going on there, and the transport that we can support with our community grants. Have you got suggestions?
Yeah, I'm going to try and cover both of us, Councillor Lang, in one. That this committee is provided with the most up-to-date information on the visitor numbers to the box per ward, so that we can see where we're not getting to. And also that councillors are encouraged to use some of their community monies to actually assist schools that are not having not having any visits to the box because of either funding through transport costs or something like that, so that we can all then go out into our wards with the information to be able to talk to the schools. So I think that would cover it all, Councillor Lang.
I'm comfortable with that. Hannah, did you manage to get all of it, or?
I've got that one, yeah.
Brilliant, lovely. Okay, well, thanks for your attendance today. I think it's a great recommendation. It's a great report. Thank you very much. As we say, it's a good success story, so we're happy there. Thanks for your attendance today and time. Wish you all the success in the future. Thank you very much.
Thank you, and look forward to seeing you all at the box.
Right, so guys, bear in mind, I said that I'm setting a limit on it as 7:30. We're now going to have an item on city centre regeneration. We're going to have a presentation. When we get to questions, can we make sure that we really target questions rather than having observations and speeches and whatever? Can we make sure we get direct questions into the members for here? Because we've still got our work programme and tracking decisions to do at the end of this. So in that spirit, I would like to invite Councillor Mark Shayer. I'd like to invite Councillor Mark Shayer to introduce the item on the agenda, please.
Chair, thank you very much for that. Firstly, may I make an apology. The reason I'm not wearing a tie as I normally would is I had my COVID and flu jabs over the weekend, and it's affected my glands, so I can't close the gap. However, we'll lead on from that. The city centre, the update. Right, along with towns and cities across the UK, Plymouth City Centre is facing a number of challenges. But we have recognised this for some time and have already delivered a number of big projects in the city centre, like the box and the barcode. And there are a number of other major projects which are now underway or just about to start, including the refurbishment of the city centre, the Guildhall refurbishment. We're all aware of the railway station and the work going on up there, and obviously Colin Campbell Court as well. Our pipeline of future projects is significant and is focused on delivering new homes in the city centre and bringing in other non-retail uses such as health. Future projects include £44 million Health and Wellbeing Centre, new homes at Bath Street, and the new Hilton Garden Inn and apartments on the Hoe. We're also investing £26.5 million on improving the public realm across the city centre. Our framework contractor, Morgan Tyndall, will be working on all of our Better Places Realm schemes, which include Old Town Street, New George Street, and we'll be taking on Armada Way, the Civic Square and Colin Campbell Courts link. The work has restarted at the Old Town Street and New George Street and is due for completion in July 2023. And our other public realm schemes due to start before the end of the year with the completion of works in 2023-2024. And work is continuing on our extensive High Street Heritage Action Zone. I've been a visitor to the city on and off and lived in the city on and off for over 50 years. And I think that this is bringing us back to the original concepts that Abercrombie himself would have had in making the city an open and pleasant place to live and work in. Okay, and I can only commend this report and the updates. Right, we'll either go to, is there anything that the officers here would like to add to that, or do we go straight over to questions? What would you like to do, Chair?
So I'm happy to ask that question. Officers, did you want to engage now, or did you want to let... I mean, I've read through the report and I've got a couple of questions, and I'm sure we will get questions. So maybe you want to just hang on and see what comes through, unless there's something burning that is different in the report you want to tell us.
Can I just take, you've had the presentation in your pack, is that right?
Yeah.
So I mean, I think perhaps maybe give the guys an opportunity just to pull out a couple of points if they want to, rather than go through the whole slide deck. But if not, probably get straight to questions. I would suggest a good idea. So, as you've done it, is there any of the slides you particularly want to highlight, or do you want us to go straight to Q&A?
Yeah, I'd be quite keen to, if you don't mind, Chair, run through Armada Way briefly, because there are some plans in there that weren't included in the in what has been distributed to members.
Yeah, okay, Martin, if we do the bit on Armada Way, I'm fine.
Sorry, yes. So we'll just start with this one, because this also was added in and won't have been in your information pack in the report. This is regarding the new West End link, which will run through the former Corner House site. So this is to connect New George Street with Colin Campbell Court, and there's a difference of height there in the region of 2.5 metres. With the health and wellbeing hub coming forward, and in the region of up to 3,000 pedestrian movements a day, it was decided that actually we could utilise some of our Transforming Cities Fund money in order to create an attractive and accessible link between effectively our primary retail area and the health and wellbeing hub. So that's what you have in front of you here, albeit a technical drawing. Is this two-way cycle route and pedestrian ramped route with landscaping, due to start on site in January of 2023 and be completed by the end of March 23, which is the deadline for our Transforming Cities Fund allocation of spending. I think we move on. So I just wanted to touch really on Armada Way and run through it relatively briskly. So Armada Way is the largest public realm scheme as part of our Better Places programme within the city centre. It's the £12.7 million scheme. We currently have our general arrangement plan, and we're now working through the more technical aspects with consultees and our partners. In terms of phasing, just so that members are aware, we're going to be starting the enabling work north of Mayflower Street towards the end of this year, with the main construction package starting in January of next year, and that will run up to the end of March 24, because we have an extra year to complete this project beyond the TCF funding deadlines. So I won't go through all of the detail of Armada Way here, but effectively what we have in front of you here is the general arrangement plan. So starting at North Cross, you can see we're talking about a restoration of the Phoenix Fountain and creating an amphitheatre space there in front of the Copthorne Hotel for smaller scale events and performances. Then as we head down Armada Way, heading south, the ambition is to restore the grand vista to the Hoe, which was always the purpose, as we know, of Armada Way, the grand processional route lined by trees. And we've slowly lost that over multiple decades of kind of piecemeal intervention. So really the purpose behind this scheme is to restore this grand centrepiece of the city centre, but make it effective and usable in as many ways as possible for the future. And particularly, this is very important when we're talking about diversifying the city centre and also bringing people to live into the city centre. This will effectively act as our linear urban park. So there will be a stream that will run north-south, and it will cascade down utilising a lot of granite curbs that are already in Armada Way to form the base of this stream. We'll have these green, what we're calling parterres, and they will include wildflower spaces. There'll be amenity grass, ping pong table playing areas. There's petanque playing areas. As we continue down over Mayflower Street there and further south into the city centre, we will have a water-based play space, so that will include some dancing jets and some kind of natural play for children to get involved in. We'll also have a lot more outdoor seating for food and beverage. And you can see that's really where there is a cluster there at the moment. As you head down towards the sundial, that's where we're going to be focusing this food and beverage eating out areas. We'll be looking at a restoration of the sundial and its setting, giving it a good clean up and actually modernising its setting. And then as you come down into the piazza, looking to replace a lot of the broken slabs that are in the area, opening up the tree pits for those existing trees that are there so that we can give those trees some space to grow, get their nutrients and the amount of water that they're currently struggling to achieve. So following this is just a couple of visuals really. That's looking down from North Cross. You can see the Phoenix Fountain and the amphitheatre in the front, and then the beginning of the stream and the green spaces that will run down with the trees lined on both sides. This is the Drake's Elite area with the dancing jets and the children's play space there, made up a lot of the boulders that we already have in Armada Way. And this is looking north towards North Cross, and if you ignore the cobbles, that's artistic licence I think was used there. And this is looking at the performance area outside of the Copthorne and the Phoenix Fountain with the new stream there on the left. So that's a very brief and rapid run through Armada Way. There's obviously a lot more detail in there, but hopefully can form basis of a start of conversation.
Thank you very much, Martin. I'm going to ask a question. I'm going to put myself first on the list. There you go, Mark. Mark, quite a few people don't get in. Martin, can I just ask, I'm looking at that slide, looking at the city centre strategy. There's a little alarm bell going on in the back of my head. Are we chopping the city in half? Are we saying from the top of the city down to Armada Way, it's going to be all occupied, modern buildings, top brand international companies, all looking smart from the train station all the way up to Plymouth Hoe, but west of that, getting down towards the market at that end of the town. You know, where's our thinking on that? That looks a bit of a divide. So we've gone like that rather than maybe like that down New George and Cornwall Street. Can I be thinking on that, please?
Yeah, no, I understand what you're saying. I think this is the transformational centrepiece of what we see as the regeneration and catalyst of the city centre. So this will obviously, hopefully, make the plots on either side of Armada Way particularly more attractive as development space. But what we hope is that this will filter out across the wider area. Obviously, there are other plans for the West End area. But really, I think, yeah, this is about bringing back the activity right to the bang smack in the city centre, focus that area, and then it will start to flood out from there.
Yeah, thanks, Martin. I'll just add to that, just to highlight that there are a couple of mentions in the report to some of the activities that have been going on and will be progressing in the West End of the city centre. So in particular, the plans for the new health hub, which Martin referred to in his earlier presentation in connection with the link there. So I expect a lot of you will have seen that we've just recently started demolition of some former commercial premises in Western Approach, and that was following us successfully completing a compulsory purchase of one of the properties there. So that work will be completed between now and Christmas, the demolition of those properties, and we're also just about to start some work to divert some services. The planning consent was granted for the health hub earlier on this year, and then a decision was taken at Cabinet just recently to provide some funding from the council towards that project, some capital funding, and we're now waiting for what we hope will be the final tranche of funding to be announced from NHS England. So that will be a really important catalyst for future phases of development in the West End of the city centre. Martin and myself and other colleagues are starting now to look at how development to the north of the health hub would look. So that's effectively the northern part of the Colin Campbell Court car park, and then working closely with City Centre Company, with Steve Hughes and the like, to make sure that fits in well with their plans for the West End of the city centre.
So the synopsis is this is the start or a part of a phased approach.
Absolutely.
Thank you very much. Councillor Coker.
Thank you, Chair. I was third, not second.
Do apologise. No, we'll go with it properly. Councillor Finn. Sorry.
I just want to say well done to the team for the, especially regard to the planning. But one thing I'd like to make absolutely clear, from the 70s onwards, we used to be proud of the city. Eastlake walk down, we had the trees, we had an environment that actually worked. When you look at it now, it's almost we've achieved nothing. A lot of money's gone into the city centre, so I think the emphasis must be we get it right this time. And I think the quality of the building architecture must be the key. You know, this Kenrend, anything will do, Kenrend it, and it's looking disastrous 5 years later. It's got to stop, and that's a key element to get it right. I don't know whether others would agree on that. So it takes as much time as it takes, but let's get it right this time. You know, we're talking about 3, 4 generations on, or decades on, and we've not got it right. So, you know, I applaud the committee in actually getting it right this time.
Thank you very much, Councillor Finn. Councillor Coker.
Thank you. As the cabinet member that got us transforming cities, I don't remember the transforming cities money covering what you mentioned earlier on about down at Colin Campbell Court. Now, to the best of my knowledge, we've not been given any more money, and we spent that when we were submitting our plans. So what has gone from the original Transforming Cities Fund to pay for that? That would be really, really interesting to know. I'm not aware that you saying this is a phased works. I am not aware the government has extended the timescale for money to be spent on transforming city projects, but I'm happy to be told no, they have, because the timescales are coming up really, really tight on that. With the fiasco of New George Street and Old Town Street, when we started work, we stopped work, we put tarmac in, we took it out. What kind of guarantees have we got for these traders that were promised one Christmas of building works, which we're now going to have 2, possibly 3? So what consultation has gone on with those to minimise their disruption of trade over that period? That's enough. I'll come back with some more in a minute.
Okay, yeah, I'm happy to take that. Firstly, on the West End link. So originally under Armada Way was a certain amount of money for Frankfurt Gate Phase 2. So we completed Frankfurt Gate Phase 1. I think in discussion with senior officers, it was decided that this, with the health hub going in, that this link, roughly around about the same amount of money, would be a more effective use of those funds in terms of enhancing pedestrian and cycle movement across the city centre than perhaps, in a way, kind of the more of a beautifying of Frankfurt Gate. And I think with that area potentially coming up for change, the allocated site within Colin Campbell Court, maybe now was not the time to focus on further enhancements to Frankfurt Gate. So that's where that additional money has come from, Councillor Coker. It's kind of just moved from slightly south from Frankfurt Gate to there. And the DFT have been made aware of that through our meetings that we have with them. In terms of Old Town Street, New George Street, yes, there's been a lot of stop-start with that, and I think the members will know about the issues that we had with utilities underground that didn't come up on surveys. No matter how good the surveys were, obviously there is a lot of infrastructure under the ground there which wasn't coming up. We have been in discussions with the city centre company and businesses. We held a consultation event with businesses to let them know once Morgan Sindall had taken over what the plans were and what the phasing was. So we've also been around other businesses. in person and spoken to them. So in terms of Christmas, that was our primary concern, with making sure that there was enough space in the city centre on the lead up to Christmas and with the light switch on. We've come to an arrangement now where the hoardings will be effectively opened up in New George Street, so that is going to be made safe. So there will be a central area through there, which will be very wide compared to obviously what we have at the moment, and also around Drake's Mall, we will be pulling the hoarding back away from the entrance of Drake's Circus Mall to ensure there's enough space up there. So that covers the Christmas period. And our consultation with businesses. Was there anything else?
I'm just going to come back to you because I've spent donkey's years being cabinet member for transport. When we started the work, and then all of a sudden, a few days later, it was all boarded up and no activity from the contractor that you'd put in there, that cannot be down to just, we found a utility. So I think it would be nice if we could be a little bit more upfront with what actually went wrong, because it's a reputation for this council, whether it's a Labour council or a Conservative council, it doesn't matter. What does matter is we put up signboards saying this is being done, then it's stopped, and then we go back and we remove the holdings, we put horrible looking tarmac down in the middle of the city centre, and then we start again. And you can't just cover it by saying we found utility problems. I've been around too long to know that cannot be the only reason. And actually, I think people deserve to know, I don't know, what the reason was, because we promised one Christmas disruption for that point. We're now coming into second. We haven't started outside the coffee hut here yet. I don't know if those plans are still going ahead, but let's be a little bit more upfront with us. We do deserve that, guys.
Right, so I'm not going to ask you. I'm not going to ask you to respond to that immediately, guys, because I want to formulate a recommendation from today to get a detailed answer on that.
Yeah.
Councillor Cooper, I don't want to take up time.
No, that's fine. More questions.
Absolutely right. So can I move on to Councillor Gosling, please?
Can I just say one thing about that? It's just important to kind of.
But David,
it's just
David,
to stand up for the team.
just a minute, David, just a second. I'm going to ask. We're going to give a recommendation. We're going to ask for a detailed answer to that specific question.
Okay.
So I'm not that bothered about taking a verbal answer now.
It wasn't about that.
Okay.
It was just to get. So I think the answer is that I agree, and I think there is some honesty. There are clearly some issues in the public domain, some issues not in the public domain that relate to contracts. And I think in terms of giving an answer, I think that the team would be really happy to do that, and particularly some of it will probably be in a Part 2 space simply because of the nature of the contracts. But I just want to say, because I think the team are desperate probably to give you a full answer, but are slightly constrained in doing so.
Happy with that, David. Councillor Gosling.
Thank you very much, Chair. So I'm sure, as everyone knows, the Armada Way scheme was built into the bid for transforming cities. You've shown us quite a lot about Armada Way. I don't see much transport there, especially sustainable transport, which is one of the raison d'etre for this scheme. How is sustainable transport and cycling in particular supported by this? And also, supplementally, adding on to Mark Coker's plans, he now shifted the transport link from Frankfurt Gate down to Colin Campbell Court. How does that affect cycling links going forward? Because this is a unified plan moving forward for cycling links through into Devonport and so on and up to St Budo. So can you answer about the sustainable transport and cycling links with this plan?
Okay, yes, so that's probably remiss of me to mention about obviously the key reason behind this is the cycle and pedestrian enhancement straight down through the city centre. And you can see on the plan in front of you there is a cycle route that starts just to the north of the Phoenix Fountain, and then runs. It is along the east side, but on this drawing it's along the top. You can see a slightly demarcated area of material. And that runs down, and then it chicanes across through the central space. in order for us to try and reduce speeds for cyclists going through that particularly steep area. And then it continues to run down along adjacent to the stream. And as you get further down, it then crosses back, runs down the side of the sundial. I don't know if we can go along to the next one. Yeah, so down along the side of the sundial, and then along that eastern edge of the new rain gardens in the piazza, thereby connecting in with Royal Parade. Also, we have the north-south pedestrian link, which goes directly straight down through the centre. That's kind of uninterrupted, running straight down. So they're the main sustainable transport elements of Armada Way. There's also mobility hubs going along there, particularly the main one outside of Mayflower House. So that will be located right on the edge of the cycle lane facilities. And I believe there's one further down near the Guildhall as well, which obviously ties into this. Once you hit Royal Parade, you're then coming into the Civic Square TCF scheme, which has its own method of dealing with cyclists. So that hopefully will answer that. In terms of the new West End link, because of the number of people visiting the health hub, again, as I said, it was hoped that this would help actually encourage people to cycle to it through providing this link. In terms of the onward connection, that's going to be part of the master plan evolution for that area. But the idea is that a new boulevard, so to speak, will run along the northern side of the health hub, and then we'll come out onto Western Approach, whereby cyclists can then continue their journey through the existing bus lane facilities there. So yeah, there is a plan to join all of these areas up together, and that's why this was considered such an important link, because it effectively opens up the whole Colin Campbell Court area to pedestrians and cyclists, whereas the Frankfurt Gate scheme perhaps wouldn't have done that.
Thank you very much for the information on that. Can I ask if we'd learnt the lessons from the original TCF Tranche 1 on the temporary scheme put in place in Armada Way? I'll ask if these cycling connections along Armada Way, are they segregated? Are they shared with pedestrians? What lessons have we learnt for the development of this main scheme?
Yes, I think they were obviously put in response to, I think, the COVID situation, weren't they? And the idea of this is that this isn't segregated, so that this will effectively be a delineated material by way of colour. So similar material, but a different contrasting colour to the pedestrian areas, and there will also be markers in the ground that will identify it as a cycle route. So I think what we didn't want was to have segregation between the two modes. But yeah, obviously there's areas where we will have to, as we go into technical design, have to make sure that we appropriately design the crossovers between the pedestrian and the cycle areas where they do come together. But yeah, that was the idea behind that.
Councillor Roy.
Thank you, Chair. The report mentions vacant properties and meanwhile use. Could you give us a bit of a summary of how many vacant properties there currently are in the city centre, how that's changed over time, and your assessment of how this plan will increase or decrease that number?
Yeah, sure, I can take that question. I don't have an exact number, but it's around to 20% of the properties that are currently vacant in the city centre. The meanwhile use project has been successful, but it's quite hard work, to be honest, working with existing landlords. Sometimes there are quite a lot of stages that the team have to go through in order to bring back a property that was vacant into a condition where it can be used by others. But notwithstanding that, there have been some successes. So there's been a couple of properties on Cornwall Street that have been brought back into use. The former Waterstones building as well, that now hosts the Climate Hub, and then the team have been working with British Land, and two of their properties in Old Town Street are currently let to meanwhile uses. So one of the focuses is to not to use the spaces for retail, because one of the things we recognise is that there is too much retail space. So it's all about giving people another reason to come into the city centre, and really that's the focus of a lot of our activity. So whilst a lot of the work that we're doing is, for example, the health hub, a different use, another reason for people to come into the city centre. Looking at what would happen to the north of that, we're looking at housing. There are a number of other sites where we're looking at trying to bring new homes into the city centre. So it's essentially the wider strategy here is about reducing the overall retail footprint, reducing the amount of retail, and diversifying the uses that we have, giving people a reason to spend more time and to live in the city centre as well.
Can I ask a supplementary, Chair? Thank you. That's really helpful. So 20% is the current figure. Okay. It would be really good to have us follow up if you have got the numbers to look at those. Thank you. My supplementary question is, we're in a cost of living crisis. Businesses in my ward, very near to the city centre, tell me that the extent to which their energy bills will be increasing over the coming months. I know there is a modest support package in place. What assessments have you made around how increased bills, impact of cost of living on the footfall in the city centre will make to businesses in the city centre, and is that accommodated for in the way you're envisaging this future plan? Do you see number of businesses, retail spaces dropping off?
We haven't done that specific analysis yet in terms of how we're responding. I think the main thing really is to, as I said, to give people more reasons to come into the city centre. So, for example, the health hub is forecast to have over 250 people working there and to bring more than 2,000 people a day into the city centre. So we hope that will support existing businesses by bringing new customers to them. The same with our strategy around bringing homes into the city centre. We're in the next month, you will certainly start seeing some activity in the adjacent civic centre, and that will provide 144 homes right in the city centre. Those people will want to have somewhere to eat and drink and to shop, and we're looking at how we promote new homes on a number of other key city centre sites as well.
Can I ask Councillor Shear's view on the business prospects given the current economic climate in the city centre and how that affects this plan?
Certainly, thank you very much for that question, Councillor. In the long term, I look at the city centre as an area very much along the same model as what's been achieved in Barcelona. So it's increasing the number of residential properties within the city centre, and I believe that will drive the increased footfall and increased use of other forms of retail units within the city centre. If you look at the Barcelona model there, they've got a great number of small restaurants, small coffee shops and bars, etc., which lend themselves to a nighttime economy, which will increase the usage of all the retail units in there at the moment. I can only hope for that. That is a dream for the future, but that's my aspiration.
David, I think you wanted to add to that?
Yeah, if I could. So, I mean, clearly there's a longer term plan about shifting new uses, and we've converted a lot of the department stores into new uses to generate new footfall. And you know better than anyone, that the whole way people shop's changing, the role of the internet, shopping, it's just completely different. So that's one part, the longer term thing. But in the short term, I think in terms of what are we doing to support those businesses, it's probably worth saying that the council's also a major landlord. And, if you look at our performance through COVID in looking after our tenants, retaining our tenants, taking a long-term view of our tenants, we lost almost none. So I think there is something as well, clearly the large multinational businesses are better equipped to cope with this storm because of the nature of their funding. But the small businesses, we recognise that they are, if you lose a small business, they don't come back. They need to be taken care of. And that's been our approach for many, many, many years. There's also an opportunity, I think, for those small businesses, particularly those of you, I'm sure you go down the city market, that actually suddenly those businesses can compete because you do provide fresh food and they do provide fresh fish, and it is cheap and it is good quality. So I think there's an advocacy role for us to actually, I know you're alluding to the same, to get behind that buy local message, the food miles message, and to encourage people to not take the easy option. I think it'll always be easier to go to a supermarket. It'll always be easier to go out of town. But actually, I think there is I believe a movement now about people care about how they spend the money and where they spend the money. And, you know, I just think the city centres capitalise that. And if you look at what's happened in the market, that, I don't know if you've been recently, but I mean, what's happened in there is quite extraordinary. You know, and it's a movement that's been driven by people, not really by authorities. And I think we just need to protect that. So my key point is the role of us as a landlord in insulating businesses and helping them take the long-term view is something we take really seriously.
Thank you, David. Yeah, Councillor Lucker.
Thank you, Chair. As an Ojana born and bred, I think this is one of the most exciting projects I've seen for the city centre in my lifetime, and I sincerely hope it comes to fruition in this form. My question relates to Colin Campbell Court and the CPOs. You're starting the project around about January of next year. Am I right in saying that there's no further legal encumbrances, the CPOs are in place, and the council will not incur any further expenditure?
Yes, that's right. The CPO has been completed, so possession of the property passed to us, and as part of that process, we haven't yet agreed the final compensation claim, but that is ongoing. So in terms of any legal impediments to delivering the health hub, there are none.
Thank you, Matt. Councillor Wheeler.
Thanks, Chair. I'm interested in the cycle routes, the chicanes in particular. Yeah, they'll slow cyclists down, which is a really good thing when there's lots of pedestrians of all ages around. Some cyclists may avoid the chicanes just by going straight along the top or along the east side. How are you going to encourage use of the cycle routes that you delineate, please?
Yes, I think there's always going to be an element of not predicting people's behaviour, and they yeah, exactly. I don't think we don't want to see cyclists going straight down the middle, but it's ultimately going to be down to a degree of enforcement along there if it comes to that. But ultimately, we are going to be hopefully in the lead up to this. So this will come out through technical design, Councillor Wheeler, where we'll be looking at more examples and ways that other cities and towns have dealt with a similar situation. But we will also be running kind of almost an education event, so to speak. So, you know, in terms of, let's say, a lot of the delivery cyclists that ride through the city centre at the moment. So, you know, on the lead up to this scheme becoming live, we'd be looking to provide information leaflets to the different premises and to these, you know, to these cyclists saying, you know, that this is the expected behaviour when cycling through the city centre to stay to these cycle paths. But other than that, I mean, as we move into technical design, hopefully we can get a little bit more information on how we can dissuade them to stay on the cycle paths as much as possible. But I haven't got that information right now.
Could I have another one?
Yeah, certainly.
Talking about the number of retail units that are empty. I cast my mind back to the Mackey vision, which is about 20 years old now. Professor Mackey envisaged shrinking the retail area. I think Mayflower Street was seen as an area for residential and workshops rather than retail, but that would obviously have required quite a lot of organisation. Are we trying to work towards that, or are we having random sites changing from retail to other uses? I thought the Mackey stuff was pretty good, and if we were able to move that in that direction, I think we'd have a wonderful city centre. Thanks.
So I agree with what you say, Councillor Wheeler. I think, unless I heard wrong, there's already a vision towards that mix of accommodation, smaller type businesses. We've got the well up going on, and we've got a situation where you're looking down the road. So I think it ties in with what Councillor Holloway was talking about a vision down the road if the visitor numbers don't improve. you're now talking about looking at some sort of contingency around modifying the development, so you get the Barcelona plan starting to take effect, which I think is going to dovetail into what you talk about. So that's a general feeling, but I'll free officers to...
You're absolutely right, 100%. And the thing to note is that transition away from retail is already happening. It's just not happening in a sort of a big boom way. It's incremental. So Derry's department store is now student accommodation, a hotel. You know, Woolworths is now a hotel. We're bit by bit nibbling away at those uses and getting new non-retail uses. And the city of Brettonside is now a cinema, etc., etc. So I think that contraction away from retail has to happen, George. It has to happen. But I would argue strongly it is happening. So you know, the civic will be housing. So you know, health uses in Colin Campbell Court. So you know, fundamentally, we don't need to go and you know shut businesses if they're performing. But as they shut and they become vacant, that's the work that really the team are doing, is introducing those new uses. And if you look at every corner of the city centre, there are non-retail uses coming in. And over time, that's the mix, I think, that will be sustainable.
The downside of that, Chair, is that the overall side of the overall size of the retail area is not reducing. The number of retail units is reducing, but the if you want to walk from one end to the other, you haven't shrunk the overall area. We've picked out bits, so bits have moved from retail to other uses, but the area occupied by retail as a whole is still the same.
So if you take Western Approach and Colin Campbell Court, would be a really good example of quite a big retraction of retail, where you know Western Approach is no longer retail. You were talking about the consolidation of sites, and then the work Matt and his team have done incredible work in assembling the site and targeting NHS England funding. That would be an example where if you actually looked at a boundary, but the other thing, we're constrained by the Abercrombie the Beaux-Arts grid plan, so there is a constraint. Which sort of, you know, wouldn't it be great if you didn't have an inner ring road, you know, if it was done again? But I think that's why it's not so visible. But I think if we showed you a map of retail, non-retail uses, and perhaps, you know, red and green, you'd really see that entrenchment. And I think if you look at it over a 20-year period and over the next 20 years, I think your vision for some of those streets that Mackie says exactly, you know, that remains the plan. 100% remains the plan.
Councillor Cougar.
Thank you. I want to go back to sustainable transport a little bit. The city centre master plan as an overall had money in there for reducing traffic, relining Royal Parade to encourage more people into the city centre. I don't know whether that's still going ahead or it's not. And also, the bit I'm struggling to understand your explanation on the cycling and getting people to use it. The latest government kind of advice is changed somewhat, that shared spaces are not the best idea in the world. Now, I'm sure up there I read that we are doing shared spaces. The only way you could do that is an expensive TRO to make those lanes compulsory, but they're never going to be able to be policed unless you've got someone sat there. So does this not go against everything that we started to do all those years ago and join it all up to produce that city centre master plan? It just seems to have cycled off down in a different direction at the moment.
If I can just start with Royal Parade, that was one of the slides originally in this presentation that we went past, so that's up on the screen there. That's not part of the Better Places schemes, but it's part of the Transforming Cities funds, as you're aware, and Historic England's contributing to that. So that scheme is still going ahead. So the team there are undertaking the technical design on it at the moment, and it is due to be on site at the start of next year and complete by August. So that is looking at the reconfiguration of the bus stops so that they're in a sawtooth arrangement to allow for easier in and out movement for the buses to stop the stacking back that we get at the moment along Royal Parade, but also a widening of the footways and greening of the footways as well. So there's new trees coming in, and we're looking at how we can better deal with issues like the guard railing and opening up the sense of Royal Parade being more of a pedestrian friendly space. So that scheme is still going ahead largely with the original TCF objectives. With the cycle route through the city centre, we had discussions internally with the transport planning team under the local transport note 120. I think it suggests that city centre environments are acceptable for non-segregated cycle routes, and that actually it does promote cycle routes being segregated, but in busy city centres and where there's a conflict with different modes, I think it allows for or encourages a shared approach, so long as it's appropriately delineated, and that's the route that a lot of city centres have gone down, who have undertaken these kind of schemes. So that's how we've ended up deviating away from the segregated model that you're speaking of.
Okay, just to come back on, I think it was either Councillor Finn or Councillor Lugger who said, we've got to make sure we get it right this time, and I can't remember which of you guys said it. But with this cycle route, it's going through the heart of the city centre. We've got a New York style, kind of that way, this way. How are you going to? We took the temporary walking and cycling one that we trialled when I was cabinet member, and I took a lot of criticism for putting that in because people were saying it's not safe. You've not made it a designated area. And that was a small route. We're now producing a master plan that's going to run from the top end to the bottom one with no different measures in that we tried with the temporary one, because we put posts up to try it, to show people where it was. So I'm just a bit concerned that we're kind of not doing anything different here, because if you paint it pink or green, it doesn't really matter what colour it is. So I'm really, really worried about that. And also the ability that we've got a huge citywide mobility hubs that we're putting in, that we're encouraging people to make it more easily for them to use other forms of transport. But are we absolutely sure that we're making this cycle route safe? That's what I'm still missing.
Yeah, no, understand concerns. I think this is still, as you say, we have the general arrangement plan at the moment. We've only just started getting into the real technical details at stage 4, where these kind of details, exactly of how we are going to make it safe, are going to start coming out through the design process with our internal consultees as well. So, I mean, by all means, happy to brief you on that subject, Councillor Coco, as we get further through the design process. Yeah.
So my strategy on this now is, thank you very much for that. I've got one person on the list. Oh, sorry, 2 people on the list. I want to let the councillors answer questions, and then I was going to give you an opportunity to sort of sum up, and then we'll look at the recommendations. Is that all right? Okay. Well, not sum up, but give your input at the end. So, Councillor Lang, please.
Thank you. What reassurances can you give us about the costs of this project, given inflationary pressures and cost and availability of materials, things like that? Thank you.
Yeah, we're obviously acutely aware of the inflation issue, but generally also, as rightly as you say, supply chain, global supply chain, and I think it's quite too often an excuse that people might use. But I mean, granite is a real issue at the moment. I think across the UK. This is one benefit that we've had with working with Morgan Sindall and their team of contractors. We've had our own quantity surveyors and cost surveyors working from day dot on this scheme. So we are really closely tracking the scheme against our cost plan. We also had a good degree of contingency built into this scheme, forecasting what could potentially happen. This scheme's come along later than the other public realm schemes, so we're now aware of what is going on in the world that we have to prepare for. So I think that's probably, I think you can take hopefully some good reassurance that we do have quantity and cost surveyors working alongside the plan as it develops.
Councillor Partridge.
Thank you, Chair. I echo Councillor Coker's statement on the safety. Is it any, as you go into the design stage, to consider, without making it dangerous for the cyclists, but if they're going to ride it at unacceptable speed amongst the pedestrian area, making the pathway they ride on a bit more uncomfortable, so that it reduces them to reduce their speed down. I don't want children to stray and get hit by a cyclist who's bouncing down at 30 mile an hour.
Yeah, I think exactly that, Councillor, and that's what we're going to be looking at in the details, is that, rumble strips and such on the approach to crossing areas, different surface treatments. Obviously, it needs to be a smooth ride for cyclists, in order to encourage them. But I think there are, at least, which is why we've tried to make the number of crossings over the pedestrian space as minimal as we can, because we are going to have to put in a different material treatment to encourage a rapid slowing down as they approach those points. So yeah, as again, it's a detailed matter, but that is what we're looking at.
Thank you, Martin. Councillor Coker.
Yeah, I didn't say about making the cycle route more difficult for cyclists. What I did do was say it needs to be safe for all users, whether you're on foot, in a mobility scooter, or whatever. So I just want to clear that up, because otherwise I'll have all the cyclists on my back when I go home. So just to clear that up, Philip, all right?
Thank you. Anthony.
Thank you, Chair. I don't know if I can sum all that up.
No.
We might be here all night. But just a few observations on it and just reflections, really. I think the first thing to say is, in terms of the whole of the city centre and the designs that you've been focusing in on tonight in detail, I mean, we're at the beginning of a more detailed consultation phase, aren't we? So that will allow the opportunity to listen and to get input and to redesign this to reflect concerns or issues as we get them back. So I think we'll be all ears to that, and we'll do our absolute best to get it as well designed and as user friendly as possible for all users. That would be my first sort of comment. Just picking up, and I'm no expert on this, but picking up on footfall, there was a recent survey that came out from the Small Business Organisation, a national survey, which actually showed that Plymouth City Centre was one of the busiest in the country now, and finding its way back quite strongly. Now, some people may find that surprising, but actually I think there has been a reasonable bounce back. That's notwithstanding the huge numbers of challenges that all city centres across the country are facing. But there was some encouraging data in what was being found in that survey. But one survey, another survey could show something different. Surveys don't always align with each other. I think that the message that I've taken from listening to this, and indeed I think David and I could say we've been working on for the last 13 years, is trying to diversify the city centre. And that diversification is the bedrock to everything we're trying to do. And we always, we ourselves are guilty of this. We're always thinking about what the next challenge is rather than thinking about some of the successes we've had. And actually, if you were to list them all down, including the box, including Drake's Circus barcode, including the repurposing of British home stores, including the repurposing of dairies, the diversification of these uses, etc., etc., etc. There's been an awful lot of change and positiveness in the city centre. It's just a really big area to deal with and to grapple with, and it's very historical, like George has pointed out, being based upon that Abercrombie grid, which was purely and solely, I mean, when I grew up in Plymouth, it was just a shopping centre with shops and nothing else.
Yeah.
And I can remember going to Dickie's in Colin Campbell Court with my mum and going all the way up to Drake's Circus and then coming all the way back down to Dickie's, and that was my day out. And getting back on the 38 bus. So, you know, I can remember all that. And no, but no, don't. But it was a cash and carry before the cash and carry called Dickie's. So, I mean, I think the challenges have been there for a very, very long time, and we're really trying to get to grip and trying to deal with them. I think the other thing that our city centre really has to grapple with is, if you look around the city and the waterfront and the Barbican and the Royal William Yard, a lot of the uses that are in those other two places you would normally find in your city centre. We've just got a plethora of really attractive sites where investors want to go to. And that's a good thing. I'm not criticising that, but equally it just makes it just that bit more challenging. And then that gets me to my final point, really, which, you know, notwithstanding, we're still waiting to know what the guidance is and the implications around investment zones and so on. But the work we've been doing behind the scenes with Homes England and with DLUC, Department of Housing and Local Communities, to really look at the prioritisation of our city centre for investment and government funding, now aligned to, hopefully, investment zone. If we go down that route and we get accepted and it's seen as a good idea, I think there's a real focus now on the diversification and the opportunity of investment sites in the city being brought forward at a more accelerated pace. And I think the final point, Chair, just to sort of raise, is when you get success in things like Transforming Cities Fund and getting a huge amount of cash coming in from government, you've got to work within their timetables, as you well know, and some of that can become quite challenging. And what we've done and what we're trying to do with the investment in the city centre is align our investment against significant investment from government, which without that, we wouldn't be able to do any of this, to be honest. And, you know, if you look at it, we've front-loaded a lot of the TCF money because we need to spend it, and we're going to be bringing our spend in at the back end to try and finalise these things as we go forward. But just on the public realm in the city centre, we've got over nearly 55–60% of that money has come from outside of the city's coffers. The rest of it, the Plymouth contribution, is either been corporate borrowing or clever use of community infrastructure levy and so on. So we're always trying to sweat money to try and minimise the costs on the local taxpayer, but at the same time, aligning that with very complex funding streams can become quite a challenge at times as well. So, I mean, I think all the points you've raised today are things that we grapple with on a constant basis. There's nothing. It's really helpful to get your comments and reflections. I don't think there's anything we've heard which, or the team have heard, that's most probably contrary to the sort of things they're dealing with and grappling with on a day-to-day basis. So thank you, Chair. Hopefully I've summarised that reasonably well.
Yeah, thank you, Anthony. I think there's been some great observations today. Thank you for the presentation, guys. In terms of recommendations, I'm not sure that there's dedicated recommendations that I see today. I'd see something that's probably halfway between a recommendation and a request, looking at comments made from Councillor Holloway and Councillor Wheeler. But also there might be something specific around the cycling stuff. I'm not sure if Councillor Gosling and yourself wanted to formulate something like that. But can I just say that looking at those observations that come across there, the team's indicated on questions from Councillor Holloway and Councillor Wheeler that indicated to adjust the plan should there be a need. So if visitor numbers don't increase, if the retail occupation doesn't improve, then you're looking to adjust the plan. I get that. I think I would like, if you adjust that plan, for it to come back quite quickly. I wouldn't want to, I know it's going to be on a work programme down the road, but what I would like is if you say, there's something we need to really quickly have a look at here and we're going to have to adjust it through you, Anthony, maybe I'd like it to come back on the agenda, so that what I don't want is members have flagged up today, something gets changed quite dramatically and we're 6 months behind the curve. So if you decide that there's something that needs changing drastically, has been sort of flagged, then can we get it back before the committee rather than leave it later?
Chair, I think if it's significant and substantial, then we'll look at that.
Yes, yes, Councillor Coker.
Sorry, Chair. One of the things that I thought we were going to agree to do was ask for a full report to the committee on what was the reason for the aborted start to the Old Town New George Street improvements.
Right.
Why did it happen? And what have we put in place to ensure that this project is completed the second time on budget and on time? So I would like to propose that we have that report because it's about public perception.
Chair, through you, I think if we do that, when we do that, it would have to most definitely be under a Part 2 item.
That's sorry, Anthony, that's just me. It's up to the committee members. If they don't think it's important, then fine. But I just think because of the amount of bad publicity that we got around the city for that, and again, it's not political, it's not because it could be whoever's running the council. I just think we need to know.
So, on a show of hands, do you want to report? Yeah, I think that's a majority. So, can we go with that, Anthony, please?
Yeah, it's not. It won't be this team, Chair. It'll be the Transforming Cities team predominantly.
Yeah. Right, thank you guys for today. Great presentation and, you know, really good answers to the questions you brought forward. So I'll thank you for your time. We just need a couple of quick items to finish off today. I missed it by 2 minutes, I think. I'm going to. Yes, Councillor Gosling.
So you mentioned earlier about a recommendation to get some reporting about the sustainable transport solutions around the bids we've heard today. Is it possible we could give a recommendation to have a report on how those are going to be implemented during the technical consultation phase? Because currently what we have is effectively £12 million spent on some obstacle-strewn coloured asphalts, which I don't really think go to the heart of the Transforming Cities bid and what it was supposed to do in transforming sustainable transport. So the devil is always in the detail, and water follows the path of least resistance. And we need to make sure that this is done right, this is done correctly. Otherwise, this has been a legacy for decades on about how we measure and promote sustainable transport through our city centre. So I think we need to, as a committee, need to understand how this process is being completed and what detail is going to be put in place.
Right, so can I ask then, guys, is that detail available today?
Sorry, detail on the sustainable transport matters relating to Armada Way.
Yes.
We could formulate a note that would say the approach that we've taken to the cycleway through the city centre and how we anticipate taking it forward, if that would help. I'm not too sure otherwise what's being asked for. Sorry, Chair.
Chair, could I take that away and talk with the Transforming Cities Fund team and the people who are doing the design work behind that, working with the Public Realm team, and we'll come back to you.
After that, Councillor Gosling? Fine. Right, work programme. If you look at... no, not really. Yeah, fine.
I'm happy.
Yeah, well, just in case something comes up. I'm looking at the work programme for the 7th of December. I think we're going to take on board, my initial thoughts are we'll take on board the climate change. Councillor James Stoneman brought that before us in June, so we were going to do a proper update on that, so I think that needs to stay on there.
Yeah.
The Freeport mobilisation, I think we need to look at that as well, definitely. What I'm going to ask from officers, the cultural plan annual update, visitor plan annual update, and heritage fund activity plan update to be sent to us minimum 7 days before in the form of a report email for us to have a look at. If there's anything drastic in there that you think that we need to bring up in the committee, then we do that. But I'd rather not put too big a itemised agenda together. I think reports are something that we can have a look at and digest ourselves. So that's probably the way it's going to go. Obviously, I do have meetings before the next meeting with officers, just in case anything, yeah, and with Mark, yeah, just to make sure, and obviously with the Scrutiny Management Board, just to make sure that if there's anything that's really important that needs to come up, we can change the agenda around. But at the moment, that's what we're looking at. Just a second, we've got Councillor Holloway.
And just in light of what we learnt today about the investment zones, the fact that more information is about to come out from the government and the expression of interest that's being put in, can we expand out the Freeport motorisation item for the December meeting to also include, you know, some scrutiny on the city's plans around the wider investment zones piece?
Sorry.
Investment zones. And the other question I had was, I know Councillor Tibbetts, who's not here now, was keen in the last meeting to include sustainable buses was what he raised, and we said that we'd put on the work plan. Is that something,
yeah, so,
which I guess is sustainable transport?
Well, I'll come on to that in tracking decisions, I think, because I think Councillor Tibbetts has had something in regards to that. But I'll do that in a second.
Thank you.
Councillor Kilgore.
Yeah, I wanted to follow up with on what Councillor Holloway said. Rather than just buses as a general chair, there's a lot of uncertainty out in the community at the moment about our tendered network, because I don't know if committee members know, but I do. The 10 tendered services that we provide as a council are up for renewal, and I've been asked by quite a few residents about the future of their tendered services, and I think seeing they cover all areas of the city, it's something that this committee should see before a decision is made, rather than afterwards for us all just to say, okay, thank you very much, because these tendered services are the ones that are vital to some parts of our community. And I really think we should be helping the cabinet member make a decision rather than afterwards.
Yeah, so for me, that's a political call. I'm not sure that I agree with that. It's a strong leader in cabinet model, so they decide what they want to do, and at the end of the day, bring it before scrutiny, and we decide whether we're happy with it or not. I'm not sure we're there to influence it at the development stage or the initiation stage. So,
well, we're trying to influence what they're doing in the city centre, and actually,
they've already got a plan.
Yeah, well, it's up to you, Chair. I've just suggested it's you're in charge.
So we'll have a conversation in a minute, Mark, all right, about where we're going to, because I don't totally disagree with you, but how we do it is something I can't get my head around right at this moment in time. So let's have a conversation outside of where we are today, and if it needs included in the next meeting, then we'll put it in, okay? Right, so that was our initial thoughts on that. I'm happy with that. Tracking decisions, which is the last one. You should have I don't know if you've got a supplement pack. So at the last meeting, Councillor Tippetts was going to be provided with a separate detailed briefing on the water storage project in Trefusis Park, which we raised at the last meeting. Yeah. As far as I'm aware, they've got that, or that has been supplied. We also had council been unsuccessful in securing funding for Tranche 3 active travel fund as the bid was subscribed. No detailed feedback had been received as to why the council bid was unsuccessful. Members were provided a written response. We got that. I got it. I assume you got it. You got it. I've got a copy of some here, so we're all on board of that. And the other one was about the climate emergency action plan. Talking about ring fencing the money with the budgetary concession fares. That's ongoing, so that will come back at the. Yeah.
I did read that today. We talked about that, and this will be in direction for the director, because obviously that the committee voted that through. We agreed that way back in June. We're in October now, and for it just to appear on our tracking as ongoing, there must be some form of direction that the council are taking with this. And I'm just worried that we'll be sitting here in December with an ongoing, and then we'll all have gone after the next election, and we won't know anything about it. It was something that was agreed by the cabinet member to review, and I actually think we deserve to have a review. I don't know what everybody else thinks. It wasn't political because the cabinet member agreed to do it.
Yeah, I agree it wasn't political, we did agree to do it, but as I understand, I do understand, because I've had a conversation, but I'm happy to have another conversation about that, as I do understand that it's something that's ongoing, it hasn't been finalised. So, again, I think we probably need to have a conversation outside of here we are today as chair and vice chair and decide a way forward on it. I can't see a problem with that. So, yeah, we'll have a separate little meeting, Mark, and decide on the couple of items that you brought up there, because they are important. But you're always going to get this from me. I'm always going to try and balance. I don't want us to take on so much that we're not giving stuff due diligence. And I think today, with regards to the city centre, we've given a really good crack at it. We've had a good time of it, rather than having another half a dozen items. So, but I do agree with you. So it's that balance. It's where you draw the line. I do agree with you. There's stuff that if we've said we want to know what's going on, we need to know what's going on. So I accept that. Any other observations, comments on today? Thank you for your attendance. Be in touch. And if nothing changes, see you in December.